The grand plaza of Vereen Prime shimmered under 1,000 hovering lights. Banners of victory stretched between marble towers. Aliens of every shape and color danced in the streets, their laughter rising like a storm after centuries of war. For the first time in memory, the galaxy was at peace. At the heart of the celebration stood High Marshal Kirith, a titan of the Zorvath Dominion, lifting the gleaming staff of surrender high above his horned head. Around him, the other dominions, the Etheri with their glassy skin, the brutal Vornak, the wise Grelians, cheered, drank, and feasted. "We did it!" Kirith roared into the night, his voice amplified by the plaza's sonic pillars. "Humanity is dead! The age of fear is over!" Cheers thundered. Above the skyline, holograms replayed the final human outpost's supposed destruction, Earth's last colony falling into ruin, a blue world turned black. The footage looped, each replay met with another roar of triumph. And then, a flicker. The hologram shimmered, glitched, and before the revelers could react, the entire sky above Vereen Prime darkened. At first, the silence was curious. Then it grew thick, oppressive, sinking into the crowd like ice into bone. From the eastern horizon, a shape emerged. Not one ship. Hundreds. Serrated, angular, matte black dreadnoughts, moving in perfect, vengeful silence. They blocked the stars, swallowing light itself. Each bore the ancient insignia no alien dared speak aloud anymore, a broken circle, the mark of Earth's forgotten armadas. Kiritha's blood ran cold. "Impossible!" he muttered, voice cracking. The Etheri ambassador beside him dropped her goblet. Glass shattered against stone. Above, the lead dreadnought opened its calm channel without invitation. No fancy introduction. No council authorization. Just a voice, human, raw, full of slow-burning rage. "You celebrated too soon." Kirith stumbled backward, staff clattering to the floor. Screams erupted. Panic rippled across the grand plaza like fire through dry leaves. Revelers dropped drinks, overturned tables, fled blindly toward alleys and transport hubs. Kiritha's lieutenant, a wiry Vornak with coal-black eyes, grabbed his shoulder. "High Marshal, we have to evacuate!" Kirith couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The human dreadnoughts kept advancing, so vast they seemed carved from nightmare. Their hulls bore scars, not of defeat, but of survival. "By decree of the Terran Accord," the human voice intoned, "you stand accused of genocide against Earth's people. Your sentence, extinction." Kiritha's mind raced. No treaty. No parley. No appeal. The skies lit up, lines of crimson lanced downward, carving the towers of Vereen Prime apart like sandcastles before a tidal wave. Buildings crumbled. Airships exploded in midair. Streets split open, swallowing the proud monuments of victory. Kirith scrambled for cover, but the world was already falling apart. To his left, the Etheri ambassador was crushed beneath a falling obelisk. To his right, the Grelians fired up emergency shields, only to be vaporized by a precision strike from orbit. This wasn't war. It was judgment. A child stumbled past Kirith, a pale, insected creature clutching a broken toy. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, a plea, a desperate, silent cry. Kirith turned away. Above, a dreadnought descended lower. It was so close now Kirith could see the markings along its hull, in memoriam, New York, Shanghai, Mumbai, Johannesburg. Cities once vibrant, now little more than memories. Humanity hadn't died. It had retreated. Waited. Adapted. And now it had returned colder, harder, utterly unforgiving. The plaza's last remaining defenses flickered to life, small kinetic cannons popping up from hidden turrets. They fired desperately into the night. The dreadnoughts didn't even slow down. A shockwave hammered the plaza. Kirith was flung across the steps of the council pyramid, coughing blood. Above him, the hologram towers toppled one after another, their final image frozen, a human soldier raising a battered flag over the ruins of a burning alien capital. Kirith crawled forward, broken, gasping. He triggered his communicator. "This is High Marshal Kirith! All forces, regroup! Defend Vereen Prime! Static. No answer. Another voice came through instead, sharp and pitiless. No rescue is coming. Kirith looked up to see the silhouette descending from the human command ship, a single figure, clad in dark battle armor, walking through the chaos as if it were nothing. Human. Alive. And impossibly, terribly calm. The figure's visor peeled back to reveal a woman's face, weathered and scarred, but steady as a blade. She knelt beside Kirith, studying him like a scientist examining a failed experiment. You thought you wiped us out, she said quietly, almost sympathetically. You taught us fear. Her eyes hardened. We taught ourselves patience. Kirith tried to speak, to beg, to plead, anything. She drew a sidearm, cold and mechanical. Kiritha's world went black. Ash rained from the shattered spires of Vereen Prime, drifting like gray snow over the broken city. Fires crawled across the skyline. The scent of ozone and burning flesh choked the air. Commander Celine Ward holstered her pistol without a glance at the fallen High Marshal. She stood alone in the wreckage, helmet off, face bared to the ruins her people had been forced to endure for centuries. Above, the dreadnoughts reoriented. Not to retreat, but to expand the purge. In the command bridge of Defiance, Earth's flagship, Admiral Noah Vance watched grimly as data streams poured in, casualty reports, evacuation patterns, shield failures across alien sectors. Sector 9 neutralized, his lieutenant reported. Remaining Etheri forces attempting to flee through the lower tunnels. Vance nodded once. Seal them. No survivors. The lieutenant hesitated. Sir, there are civilians, younglings. Vance's jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered behind his steel-blue eyes. Then it was gone. Do it, he said. The bridge fell silent. Orders carried weight now, every word a verdict passed. Celine's voice crackled through the main channel. Admiral, Vereen Prime's primary generators are destabilizing. Recommend pulling Defiance to high orbit before the chain reaction hits. Negative, Vance replied. Hold position. I want them to see us when their world dies. He cut the transmission before she could argue. Below, alien survivors scrambled like insects across the ruins, firing useless plasma bolts into the sky. Human gunships strafed the streets with ruthless precision, collapsing resistance before it could rise. Yet amid the annihilation, a signal flared. An encrypted pulse, human in origin, broadcasting from deep beneath the council pyramid. Celine caught it first. Admiral, intercepting an Earth-coded distress beacon. It's old, decades old. Buried tech. Vance frowned. Patch it through. Static filled the bridge. Then a voice, frail, cracked with time. This is Outpost Omega. If you're hearing this, we failed. The Council found us. Took the children. The experiments, the betrayals. We were never meant to survive. But if any Terrans still live, avenge us. The recording died in a whimper of static. Celine closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the old stories, the ones whispered between hidden bunkers and forgotten ships. Of the captured. The dissected. The broken. Outpost Omega had been Earth's last hope during the war. A sanctuary for scientists and refugees. Until the aliens found it and turned it into a grave. Vance's voice hardened. New objective. No quarter. No surrender. These ruins are soaked with our dead. We owe them justice. Celine acknowledged silently, heart hammering. The mission had changed. This was no longer strategic reclamation. It was personal. And yet, a sliver of doubt pierced her armor. Not all here had been soldiers. Not all had chosen the war. Still, she moved. Orders were orders. Humanity could not afford mercy. Not now. Beneath the plaza, in the forgotten underlevels of the council pyramid, a desperate few huddled in the darkness. Ambassador Vrel, one of the last surviving Etheri officials, clutched a trembling child to her glassy chest. Around her, the final remnants of the once mighty coalition, council scribes, wounded guards, crying civilians, waited for the inevitable. "They're monsters," one counselor hissed, blood streaking his robes. "No better than we were." Vrel said nothing. She knew better. The humans had become something worse than monsters. They had become history's reckoning. Above, the distant rumble of battle edged closer, each boom a heartbeat hammering in her ears. "I hear them," the child whispered, voice like a leaf in a storm. "The sky is angry." Vrel squeezed his hand. "Shh, close your eyes." A sudden blast tore open the ceiling. Dust and debris rained down. A black armored figure descended through the gap, landing in a crouch. "Celine." She rose slowly, weapon drawn, visor glinting in the dim light. The counselors backed away, instinctively shielding themselves. Vrel stepped forward, trembling but defiant. "You've won," she rasped. "What more do you want?" Celine's weapon didn't waver. "Accountability," she said. "You'll kill children for that?" Celine hesitated. Behind her, more human soldiers rappelled into the ruins, weapons trained. The child beside Vrel stared up, uncomprehending. Celine lowered her gun slightly. Her voice dropped to a murmur only Vrel could hear. "They took ours first." Tears welled in Vrel's glassy eyes, refracting the flickering lights. "We were afraid," she whispered. "Afraid of what you could become." "You were right," Celine said flatly. With a sharp motion, she gestured her soldiers forward. The counselors were seized. No violence, yet no kindness either. Vrel clutched the child tighter as human gauntlets pulled them apart. Above, the last towers of Vereen Prime groaned and collapsed in thunderous ruin, shaking the very ground. Celine watched it happen without expression. She turned her gaze skyward. Defiance hovered like a specter against the bleeding sky. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The Undercity burned. Explosions bloomed across the subterranean corridors as the last of the resistance made a futile stand. Gunfire echoed down the long-forgotten tunnels, but it was already over. Humanity's soldiers moved like wraiths through the smoke, swift and unstoppable. Celine led the advance, helmet back on, visor ghosting her face in the green light of tactical feeds. Beside her, Lieutenant Harris marched grimly, scanning for signs of organized defense. "Movement ahead," Harris reported, nodding toward a bulkhead barely holding together under the strain. Celine raised a fist. Her squad fanned out, weapons ready. The doors cracked open. Out stumbled not warriors, but prisoners. Gaunt, trembling survivors. Humans. Their tattered uniforms bore faded earth insignias, forgotten relics from a war no one else remembered. Celine froze. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to fracture. "Stand down!" she barked at her men, who had instinctively raised rifles. One of the prisoners, an old man, skeletal but unbroken, stared at her through swollen eyes. You're real?" he rasped. Celine approached cautiously. "What is this place?" The old man coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Omega's heart. The ones they didn't kill, they kept. Experiments. Puppets. We stayed hidden when they thought we were dead." Behind him, others emerged, broken families, former soldiers, even children who should have grown old by now. Some bore mechanical limbs, crude grafts of alien tech stitched to their bodies. Experiments in fear and control. Celine's gut twisted. Above, Admiral Vance's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Commander status?" She hesitated. "Sir, we've found survivors. Human." A beat of silence. Then Vance's voice returned, colder than before. "They're compromised. Euthanized." Celine's blood iced over. She stared at the faces before her. Not enemies, not anymore. Victims. "They're not a threat," she said, voice low. "You have your orders," Vance said. Celine clenched her fists until the armored gloves creaked. "No," she whispered. Vance's voice sharpened to a blade. "Are you refusing a direct command?" "I am," she said clearly, cutting the channel. Harris shifted nervously. "Commander, we can't." "We won't," Celine said, steel threading through her voice. "We're not them." Behind her, the squad hesitated. Training warred with conscience. Finally, one by one, they lowered their rifles. Celine turned back to the survivors. "Get them to the extraction point. Now." Harris nodded, moving quickly to organize the evac. But it was too late for quiet rebellion. Above, Defiance shifted its position. New targeting beacons activated, painting the Undercity in invisible death. They weren't going to allow a disobedient battalion to live. Collateral damage was cheaper than mutiny. Celine's visor pinged a countdown, missile strike inbound, 120 seconds. She didn't think. She acted. "All units, this is Celine Ward," she shouted into the general channel. "Evac immediate. Full sprint to the eastern tunnels. If you stay, you die." Some listened. Some froze. Some, those still loyal to Vance, opened fire. Betrayal ripped through the ranks. Humanity, once again, devouring itself from within. Celine pulled a boy no older than 10 behind her, shielding him with her armor as plasma bolts tore past. Gunfire lit the tunnels. Chaos reigned. At the extraction point, a battered human transport, Mercy's Wing, waited with engines screaming. Pilots waved frantic signals as evacuees poured into the cargo bay. Celine fired back at pursuing loyalists, each shot clean, efficient. She didn't hate them. They were trapped, just like she had been. A blast rocked the tunnel behind her, the first impact from the dreadnoughts' barrage. Dust and flame chased her heels as she pushed the last survivors aboard. She turned for one final sweep, her eyes locking onto Harris, wounded but covering the retreat. "Commander!" he shouted, tossing her a salvaged beacon. She caught it, understanding instantly, a signal flare that could override targeting systems, a chance to blind the Defiance just long enough to escape. But it needed manual activation. Celine looked at Harris. He nodded grimly. Without hesitation, he charged back into the collapsing tunnels, beacon held high. Celine screamed his name, but the roar of detonation swallowed her voice. The last thing she saw was Harris disappearing into the fire. A moment later, the targeting systems blinked and failed. The Mercy's Wing lifted off just ahead of the Inferno, battered but alive. Celine stood in the open bay door, armor scorched, body bruised, watching Vereen Prime crumble into molten ash behind them. A funeral for the galaxy's sins. On the Bridge of Defiance, Admiral Vance watched impassively as the screen went black. He knew Celine had survived. He also knew what her survival meant. "Initiate Code Black," he ordered. The officers around him stiffened. "Sir, that's civil war." "Better civil war than treason," Vance said. "Humanity must be united. Even if we must burn it clean first." The bridge lights dimmed as systems locked into wartime configuration. Earth would not fracture again. At least, not if he could crush the spark before it became a blaze. In the med bay of Mercy's Wing, Celine peeled off her battered armor. A medic tried to patch the burns on her side. She waved him off. She stared at the handful of survivors, fragile, battered, clinging to hope they scarcely believed in. Celine closed her eyes. "We survived genocide. We fought extinction. And now we'll fight betrayal." The galaxy had thought humanity was finished. They were wrong. They had only seen the anger of humanity. Now they would face its resolve. The stars burned cold above the shattered remains of Vereen Prime. In the vastness of space, Mercy's Wing floated like a wound barely stitched together. Its systems flickered, battered from the escape. The few survivors huddled in the lower decks, their hopes fragile as cracked glass. Celine stood alone in the war room, a dim holographic map flickering before her. Red spheres, Earth's dreadnoughts, held orbit over conquered worlds. New blue signals bloomed, splinter factions loyal to her rising from the ashes, refusing Admiral Vance's iron grip. Rebellion had begun. Behind her, the door hissed open. Dr. Evan Malik, the ship's reluctant medic and former colonial scientist, stepped inside. "You asked for me?" he said, voice cautious. Celine nodded. "You intercepted Vance's last transmission?" Malik hesitated, then handed her a cracked data slate. Celine read the message, Code Black authorized. All dissidents to be eradicated, including civilian witnesses. Her throat tightened. It was worse than she feared. Vance wouldn't just crush the rebellion. He would erase it, turning humanity's greatest revenge into a second self-inflicted genocide. Celine lifted her gaze to Malik. How many ships answered our call? Not many, he admitted. Old patrol vessels. Merchant raiders. Few defectors from the dreadnought crews. But it's something. Celine's mind raced. They had no heavy weapons, no real fleet, no homeworld to rally around. But they had truth. And sometimes that was enough. Deep within the command bridge of Defiance, Admiral Vance stared into the black between stars. His reflection, ghost-like, hovered over the burning horizon of Vereen Prime below. Commander Ward survived. His intelligence officer confirmed, unwilling to meet his gaze. Vance said nothing for a long moment. Finally, he turned. Prepare the Scorch Protocol. Glass every world she touches. Let them see what disobedience buys. The officer hesitated. Sir, civilians. Civilians died the day they chose rebellion. Vance snapped. The officer saluted stiffly, shame burning in his cheeks. Orders were orders. Even when they poisoned the soul. Across the ruins of the sector, Celine's message spread like wildfire. Not a call to battle. A call to conscience. She stood before a hastily rigged transmitter, her voice raw but unyielding. We were forged in extinction. They tried to erase us once. We survived. Now they ask us to become what we hated. I say no. I say humanity is better than this. Around the galaxy, battered soldiers, exiled scholars, forgotten farmers tuned in. Across broken colonies and hidden outposts, her voice lit sparks in the hearts of the scattered and the lost. On abandoned moons, old Terran flags were pulled from dusty closets. On derelict stations, oath-breakers wept and pledged allegiance to the idea of humanity, not to Vance's rule of terror. Celine wasn't building an army. She was rebuilding a soul. The final battle came not with grand fleets colliding, but with a choice. On the Bridge of Defiance, Vance ordered the launch of the Scorch Fleet, dozens of ships prepped to incinerate any planet offering Celine shelter. But something unexpected happened. One by one, captains refused. Mutinies erupted on the launch decks. Pilots sabotaged their own hangars. Entire dreadnoughts powered down weapons, choosing shame over slaughter. Vance, betrayed by the very machine he had commanded so coldly, raged. His fists slammed into consoles. His officers deserted him. He was alone in the end, surrounded by silence. His final command never issued. His fleet shattered not by force, but by the human spirit he had underestimated. Celine watched from Mercy's wing as the dreadnoughts drifted, powerless. Vance's image flickered onto her screen, disheveled, defeated. You think you've won? He spat. Celine studied him for a long moment. No, she said softly. We chose not to lose ourselves. Vance sneered. Without control, humanity will devour itself again. Maybe, Celine admitted. But it will be our choice. Not yours. She cut the transmission. Vance's final fate was left to the very people he had sought to dominate. And they chose exile over execution. He was set adrift, alone, in the cold blackness between systems, a relic of a darker age. Weeks later, on a liberated moon colony scarred by ancient wars, Celine stood among the survivors. There was no grand ceremony. No endless banners. No hollow speeches. Just men, women, and children planting new seeds in ruined soil. A beginning, not a celebration. A boy she barely recognized, a child rescued from the tunnels of Vereen, approached her shyly, holding a battered Terran flag. Its edges were frayed, its colors faded. Is it ours now? He asked. Celine knelt down, her armor creaking. No, she said, taking the flag gently. It always was. The wind caught the cloth, snapping it into the sky, battered but proud. Above them, the stars stretched endless and waiting. This was not a galaxy of conquest anymore. It was a galaxy of survivors. And humanity, broken, bloodied, but unbowed, would rise again, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as builders of something new. Something worthy. Celine rose, her silhouette framed against the rising twin suns. The future was unwritten. And for the first time in centuries, it was truly theirs.